Hey there, and welcome to Dark Creaky TV. If you're new, hit that subscribe button for spine-tingling Reddit creepypasta stories that are perfect for a night of chilling thrills. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and let's get into tonight's stories. The Ouija board said I would die soon, and now I'm terrified. Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be one of those people posting on here, but I need to get this off my chest. Maybe writing it down will make me feel less crazy. I'm not looking for sympathy, just some advice on how to deal with this. It started a few weeks ago when my friends and I decided to mess around with a Ouija board. Yeah, I know, it sounds cliche, but it happened, and I'm seriously freaking out. We were having one of those typical Friday nights, bored and drunk. My buddy Mike had found this old, beat-up Ouija board at a garage sale. He thought it would be fun to scare the crap out of us. I wasn't too keen on it, but I didn't want to be the buzzkill. So, we turned off the lights, lit some candles, and sat around the board in his dingy basement. There was me, Mike, his girlfriend Sarah, and our friend Jason. At first, it was all laughs and giggles. We asked the usual stupid questions about who had a crush on who, if Sarah was going to marry Mike, all that crap. But then, things got weird. The planchette started moving faster, like it had a mind of its own. We all swore we weren't pushing it. And honestly, I believed them. We asked if there was a spirit with us, and it spelled out yes. Mike, being the idiot he is, asked it to prove it was real. The candles flickered, and there was this sudden cold breeze that made us all shiver. It felt like someone had opened a freezer door right next to us. We were all scared, but trying to play it cool. Mike asked the spirit its name, and it spelled out something I couldn't pronounce. We all just stared at the board, not really knowing what to do next. Then Jason, who was the biggest skeptic, asked the question that haunts me now. When will we die? The planchette moved slowly at first, then sped up, spelling out soon. We all laughed nervously, but it didn't feel funny anymore. I asked, who will die first? The planchette went still for a moment, and then, as if with purpose, it spelled out my name, John. I laughed it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled over me. We ended the session, and everyone tried to laugh it off, saying it was just a game, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, I had trouble sleeping. Every little noise made me jump. I kept seeing shadows moving in my room, but I convinced myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. A few days later, I started noticing strange things happening around me. My phone would ring, and when I'd answer, there'd be nothing but static on the other end. I started getting these weird, cryptic texts from unknown numbers. They'd say things like, "Time is running out," and "You can't escape." I thought it was just my friends messing with me, but when I confronted them, they all swore it wasn't them. One night, I woke up to the sound of someone whispering my name. My room was pitch dark, but I could feel this heavy presence around me. I reached for my phone to check the time, and it was exactly 3 a.m. The whispers got louder, and I could make out my name being repeated over and over again. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or scream. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I lay there, drenched in sweat, heart pounding in my chest. The next day, I tried to go about my routine, but everything felt off. At work, my computer started glitching, displaying random, disturbing images. Faces twisted in pain, bloody hands reaching out as if trying to grab me through the screen. My co-workers didn't notice anything weird, but I could barely focus. I started feeling like I was losing my mind. Things escalated quickly after that. I began seeing this dark figure everywhere I went. It would be standing at the end of the hallway in my apartment building, or in the reflection of a store windows when I walked past. Always just out of reach, but undeniably there. I even started seeing it in my dreams, looming over me, whispering in that same eerie voice. One night, I woke up with a jolt, feeling like someone was watching me. I turned on the light, and there, at the foot of my bed, was the Ouija board. I know I left it at Mike's place, so how the hell did it get here? I grabbed it and threw it in the trash, but that didn't stop the nightmares. If anything, they got worse. The dark figure started getting closer, its whispers growing louder and more insistent. The final straw came last night. I was taking a shower, trying to wash away the stress, when I felt something cold and slimy touch my ankle. I looked down and saw a hand, pale and skeletal, reaching out from the drain. I screamed and jumped out of the shower, but the hand vanished as quickly as it appeared. I stood there shaking, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. But it felt real. It felt too real. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm scared to go to sleep, scared to be alone, scared to even leave my house. Every time I close my eyes, I see that dark figure, hear those whispers. I keep telling myself it's just my imagination, but deep down, I know it's not. Something is after me, and I don't know how to stop it. If anyone has any advice, anything at all, please let me know. I don't think I can handle this much longer. The Ouija board said I would die soon, and now I'm terrified it's right. Hey Reddit, it's John again. I'm back because things have only gotten worse since my last post. I didn't think it was possible, but the terror I feel now is beyond anything I ever imagined. I'm desperate for help, for any kind of solution, because I'm hanging by a thread here. After that night with the hand in the shower, I decided I needed to get rid of the Ouija board once and for all. I went back to Mike's place, told him what happened, and we agreed to burn it. We took it out to his backyard, doused it with lighter fluid, and set it on fire. I watched as the flames consumed the board, hoping that would be the end of it. But I was wrong. So wrong. That night I had the most vivid nightmare I've ever experienced. I was lying in my bed, unable to move, when the dark figure appeared at the foot of my bed again. This time, I could see its face, or rather, the lack of it. It was just a void, a black hole where its features should have been. It reached out to me with its skeletal hand, and I felt this unbearable cold seep into my bones. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Then it spoke. Not in whispers this time, but in a deep, guttural voice that seemed to echo inside my skull. "You cannot escape," it said. "Your time is near." I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, just lay there staring at the ceiling, afraid to close my eyes. The next day, I went to work like a zombie. My co-workers noticed something was off and kept asking if I was okay. I lied and said I was just tired, but I could see the concern in their eyes. During my lunch break, I decided to do some research. I read countless stories about people who'd used Ouija boards and experienced similar things. Most of them ended badly. I came across a post that suggested seeking help from a medium or a spiritual advisor. I was skeptical, but I was willing to try anything at that point. I found a local medium named Claire who had good reviews and made an appointment for that evening. When I arrived at her place, she could tell right away that something was wrong. Her house was filled with the smell of incense and lined with crystals and talismans. She invited me to sit and asked me to tell her everything. I told her about the Ouija board, the dark figure, the whispers, everything. Claire listened intently, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and concern. "You've opened a door," she said, "and something very dark has come through. It's attached itself to you." She offered to perform a cleansing ritual to try to rid me of the entity. Desperate, I agreed. She had me lie down in the middle of a circle of candles and crystals, chanting words I didn't understand. I felt a strange sensation, like a weight being lifted off my chest, and for a moment I thought it was working. But then, the candles flickered violently, and I felt an icy grip around my throat. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Claire's chanting grew louder, more urgent, but it was no use. The dark figure was there, standing over me, its void-like face inches from mine. It whispered, "You belong to me now." I blacked out and woke up in a cold sweat, Claire shaking me, her face pale with fear. "I've never encountered anything this powerful," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can help you." Feeling more hopeless than ever, I left Claire's place and drove home. My house felt different, darker somehow. I went straight to bed, hoping exhaustion would knock me out. But the nightmares came back, more intense than ever. I saw visions of my own death, brutal, violent, and inescapable. The dark figure was always there, watching, waiting. I woke up this morning with bruises on my neck, as if something had been choking me in my sleep. My body aches, and I feel like I haven't slept in days. The dark figure is always just at the edge of my vision, a constant reminder that my time is running out. I've started hearing whispers during the day now too, even when I'm surrounded by people. They say things like, "soon," and "you can't hide." I'm terrified, Reddit. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I've tried everything I can think of, but nothing works. If anyone out there has any experience with this kind of thing, please, I'm begging you, help me. I don't want to die, but I feel like I'm already living in a nightmare. I'll update if anything changes, but for now, I'm just trying to survive each day. Please, if you have any advice, let me know. I don't know how much more of this I can take. Hey Reddit, it's John again. I wish I could tell you things have gotten better, but they haven't. In fact, it's like my life is spiraling further into this nightmare, and I don't know how much more I can take. I need to share what's happened since my last post, because it's beyond anything I could have imagined. If you're reading this, please bear with me. I'm trying to stay sane, but it's getting harder every day. After the visit to Claire, I felt like I was running out of options. The bruises on my neck were a constant reminder that this thing was real, and it wasn't going away. I decided to take a few days off work, partly because I was exhausted, and partly because I didn't want my co-workers to see how bad things had gotten. I spent most of my time researching, trying to find anyone who might be able to help. I found a forum dedicated to paranormal experiences and posted my story, hoping someone there might have some insight. Most of the responses were the usual mix of skeptics and believers, but one message stood out. It was from a user named Watcher, who claimed to be a demonologist. He said he'd seen cases like mine before and offered to help. I was hesitant, but he seemed knowledgeable, so I agreed to talk to him. We set up a video call, and when Watcher appeared on my screen, he looked serious, almost grave. He asked me to describe everything in detail, and I did. When I finished, he was silent for a moment before speaking. "You're dealing with a very powerful entity," he said. "It's not just a spirit, it's something darker, something malevolent. These things feed on fear and chaos, and it's latched onto you because of the Ouija board." He explained that traditional cleansing methods might not work against something this strong. Instead, he suggested a more extreme approach, a binding ritual. It was risky, he said, but it might be my best shot. Desperate, I agreed to try it. Watcher gave me a list of supplies and instructions for the ritual, warning me to be extremely careful. "If anything goes wrong," he said, "it could make things worse." I gathered everything I needed: a black candle, a piece of onyx, salt, and a silver dagger. The ritual had to be performed at midnight during the new moon, when the veil between our world and the spirit world is thinnest. I was nervous, but I knew I had to try. Anything was better than living in constant fear. The night of the ritual, I set everything up in my living room. The house was eerily quiet, and the air felt heavy. I lit the black candle and drew a circle of salt around me, as Watcher had instructed. Holding the onyx in one hand and the dagger in the other, I began to recite the incantation he'd given me. As I spoke the ancient words, I felt a cold wind whip through the room, extinguishing the candle. The darkness was complete, and I could feel the presence of the entity growing stronger. Suddenly, the dark figure was there, inside the circle with me. Its void-like face was inches from mine, and I could feel its icy breath on my skin. I kept chanting, my voice shaking but determined. The figure reached out, and I felt its skeletal fingers close around my throat. I gasped for breath, but I forced myself to keep going. Just when I thought I was going to pass out, there was a blinding flash of light. The figure recoiled, hissing like a snake, and for a moment it seemed to flicker like a shadow caught in a strong wind. I plunged the dagger into the onyx as Watcher had told me to, and shouted the final words of the incantation. There was a deafening roar, and the figure exploded into a cloud of black smoke that filled the room, then dissipated into nothing. I collapsed, gasping for air, my whole body trembling. For a moment I thought it was over. I lay there, too exhausted to move, and then I heard it. A soft whisper, so faint I almost missed it. "This isn't over." The voice was different, deeper, more menacing. It was as if the entity had only been wounded, not destroyed. Since that night, the dark figure hasn't appeared again, but I can still feel its presence. The whispers are constant now, always in the back of my mind, reminding me that it's still there, watching, waiting. I've started seeing things out of the corner of my eye, shadows moving, dark shapes lurking just beyond my vision. I've even heard footsteps in my house, though I know I'm alone. Sleep is impossible. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back in that circle, feeling the entity's fingers around my throat. I've taken to sleeping with the lights on, but it doesn't help. The nightmares are relentless, more vivid and terrifying than ever. I wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, my throat raw from crying out. I'm at my wit's end, Reddit. I don't know what to do anymore. Watcher says the binding ritual weakened the entity, but it's still attached to me. He's trying to find another solution, but I don't know how much longer I can hold on. Every day is a struggle, every night a battle for my sanity. If anyone out there has any ideas, any way to help, please, I'm begging you. I feel like I'm losing myself to this thing, and I'm terrified it's only a matter of time before it comes back for me. Hey Reddit, it's John again. This is probably going to be my last post. Things have escalated to a point where I don't even know if I'll make it through the night. I'm sharing this now because if something happens to me, I want someone to know the whole story. Maybe it'll help someone else avoid the same fate. After the binding ritual, things were quiet for a few days. I started to hope that maybe, just maybe, the worst was over. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before the entity made its move. And I was right. It started with the shadows. They grew darker, more defined, moving in ways that defied logic. I'd see them slithering across the walls, pooling in corners, then disappearing when I tried to focus on them. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, telling me to give up, to embrace the darkness. They called me by name, taunting me, promising pain and suffering. I reached out to Watcher again, but he had no new advice. He said he was researching, but his voice held a note of hopelessness that chilled me to the bone. I started looking into other options, priests, shamans, anyone who might have a way to help, but every lead ended in a dead end, and the sense of dread grew stronger every day. Then, the physical attacks began. At first, it was small things, scratches on my arms, bruises that appeared out of nowhere, but it quickly escalated. One night, I woke up to the feeling of something sharp digging into my side. I looked down and saw 3 deep bloody scratches running down my ribs. I ran to the bathroom, trembling, and tried to clean the wounds, but the blood just kept coming. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow. Not that I thought it would help, but it gave me some semblance of control. Every night I'd lie in bed, clutching the knife, listening to the whispers and the footsteps. I was afraid to fall asleep, but staying awake was no better. I was trapped in a nightmare, and there was no way out. Last night was the worst. I was lying in bed, trying to keep my eyes open, when I felt the temperature drop sharply. My breath came out in frosty puffs, and I knew it was here. The dark figure materialized at the foot of my bed, its void-like face staring down at me. It reached out with its skeletal hand, and I felt a crushing pressure on my chest. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. It leaned in close, and for the first time, I saw something in that void. 2 red, glowing eyes, filled with malice. "You cannot escape," it hissed. "You are mine." In a last-ditch effort, I grabbed the knife and swung wildly. The blade passed through the figure, meeting no resistance, but it recoiled, hissing in anger. I bolted from the bed and ran to the living room, where I'd left my phone. I called Watcher, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. He answered on the second ring, and I could hear the fear in his voice. "It's too strong," he said. "I'm sorry, John. I've done everything I can, but this entity, it's beyond my abilities." I sank to the floor, feeling utterly defeated. "What do I do?" I whispered. "I can't live like this." There was a long pause. "There might be one last thing you can try," Watcher said. "It's dangerous, and there's no guarantee it will work, but it might be your only chance." He explained that there was a ritual of banishment, a final, desperate attempt to sever the entity's hold on me. It involved drawing the entity into a physical object and then destroying it. The catch was, the entity would fight back with everything it had, and if I failed, it could consume me entirely. I didn't see any other choice. Watcher guided me through the preparations. I gathered the materials: salt, black candles, a mirror, and a silver locket that had belonged to my grandmother. The ritual had to be performed at the stroke of midnight in total darkness, with only the candles for light. As the clock struck midnight, I began the ritual, chanting the words Watcher had given me. The air grew cold, and the shadows in the room seemed to come alive, writhing and twisting around me. The dark figure appeared, its eyes glowing with fury. I held up the locket, focusing all my will on drawing the entity into it. The figure screamed, a sound that chilled me to my core. It lunged at me, and I felt a searing pain in my chest, as if my heart was being ripped out. I kept chanting, tears streaming down my face from the pain and fear. The figure's form began to waver, and I could feel it being pulled toward the locket. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, there was a blinding flash of light. The figure let out one final ear-piercing scream and was sucked into the locket. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, my body trembling uncontrollably. I knew I had to finish the ritual. With the last of my strength, I took the locket and threw it into the fireplace. I lit the black candles and chanted the final words. The locket glowed red hot, and then there was a loud crack as it shattered into pieces. The room fell silent, the oppressive presence lifting. I don't know if it's truly over. The house feels different, lighter, but I'm still on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I haven't seen the dark figure since, and the whispers have stopped. I'm trying to piece my life back together, but the scars, both physical and mental, are a constant reminder of what I went through. I'm sharing this with you, Reddit, because I want to warn others. Don't mess with things you don't understand. The paranormal isn't a joke, and there are forces out there that we're not equipped to handle. If you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, seek help immediately, and don't try to face it alone. I don't know what the future holds, but for now, I'm just grateful to be alive. I'm taking it one day at a time, trying to rebuild my life. Thank you to everyone who offered advice and support. It meant more than you'll ever know. Stay safe, and please, be careful. I played with a Ouija board, and now I see shadows everywhere. Alright, I never really believed in this sort of stuff. Ghosts, spirits, demons, all seemed like bullshit to me. But I guess when you're drunk and bored, you'll do just about anything for a thrill. This all started one night when my friends and I decided to mess around with a Ouija board. It was just supposed to be a joke, something to laugh about the next day. But now, I'm scared shitless, and I have to share this because I don't know what else to do. So, we were at my buddy Ryan's place. It was one of those typical Saturday nights, a bunch of 20-somethings hanging out, drinking, talking crap. Someone, I think it was Jake, brought up the idea of trying a Ouija board. We all laughed it off at first, but then, fueled by a mix of vodka and beer, we thought, why not? We were idiots. Ryan had this old Ouija board that he said belonged to his grandmother. It was dusty and looked ancient, like it had been shoved in the back of a closet for decades. We set it up on his living room floor, lit a few candles to set the mood, and started playing. At first, it was the usual nonsense, pushing the planchette around, spelling out stupid questions like, who will get laid tonight? And, is Jake's ex still into him? But then, things got weird. The planchette started moving on its own. We all thought it was someone messing with us, but the way it moved, it was too precise, too forceful. It spelled out HELLO. We all stared at each other, a bit freaked out, but still thinking it was a prank. I mean, it had to be, right? Who's there? I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. The planchette moved again, this time faster. SHADE. We all looked at each other, confused. Shade? What the hell does that mean? Suddenly the candles flickered, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. I swear I saw a shadow dart across the wall, but it was probably just my imagination. The planchette continued to move, spelling out more words. DARKNESS, FEAR, DEATH. By this point, we were all genuinely freaked out. Ryan tried to end the session, but the planchette wouldn't move to goodbye. It felt stuck, like something was holding it in place. Then it spelled out one last word, LEAVE. We didn't need to be told twice. We bolted out of there, laughing nervously, trying to shake off the eerie feeling. But the night was ruined. I went home, trying to brush it off as a stupid prank, but something about it gnawed at me. That night, I had the most vivid nightmare. I was in Ryan's living room, but it was dark, and the only light came from the flickering candles. Shadows twisted and moved on their own, and I felt this overwhelming sense of dread. I tried to wake up, but I couldn't. The shadows started closing in on me, whispering my name, promising things I didn't want to hear. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I jolted awake, drenched in sweat. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just a dream. But over the next few days, weird things started happening. I'd catch glimpses of shadows out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there'd be nothing there. Objects in my apartment seemed to move on their own. I could swear I left my keys on the kitchen counter, but I'd find them in the bathroom. My cat, normally friendly and affectionate, started hissing at empty corners of the room. I started hearing whispers at night, just as I was about to fall asleep. They were faint, barely audible, but they were there. I'd lie in bed, frozen, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. One night I woke up to the sound of scratching. It was coming from inside my closet. I tried to ignore it, but it grew louder, more insistent. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a baseball bat and threw open the closet door. Nothing, just my clothes and a pile of shoes. But the scratching stopped. I didn't know what to do. I didn't believe in ghosts or spirits, but I couldn't deny that something was happening. I called Ryan, but he brushed it off, saying it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I wanted to believe him, but the shadows kept coming. They were always there, just out of sight, watching, waiting. I started losing sleep, afraid of what might happen if I let my guard down. I became paranoid, jumpy, always looking over my shoulder. My friends noticed, but I couldn't tell them the truth. They'd think I was crazy. Hell, I thought I was crazy. But the shadows were real. I could feel them. And then, one night, everything changed. I was lying in bed, trying to sleep despite the whispers. Suddenly, I felt something cold and clammy wrap around my ankle. I screamed and kicked, but it wouldn't let go. It started pulling me off the bed, dragging me towards the closet. I fought with everything I had, thrashing and screaming, but the grip was too strong. Just as I was about to be pulled into the darkness, it let go. I scrambled back onto the bed, heart pounding, and turned on every light in the room. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, too scared to close my eyes. That was the final straw. I had to do something, anything to get rid of whatever I'd unleashed. I started researching, trying to find a way to break the curse or whatever it was. But nothing seemed to help. The shadows kept coming, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they got me. I don't know how much longer I can take this. The shadows are everywhere, watching, waiting. I can feel them, and I know they're not going to stop. Not until they've taken me. I played with a Ouija board, and now I see shadows everywhere, and I don't think I'll ever be free. After that night, things went from bad to worse. The shadows weren't just lurking anymore. They were becoming more aggressive. Every time I turned off the lights, I could feel them closing in, getting bolder. My apartment, once my sanctuary, felt like a prison. Each room had its own dark corner where the shadows seemed to gather, whispering my name, taunting me. I decided to confide in my best friend, Emily. Emily and I had known each other since high school, and if anyone could help me, it was her. When I told her about the Ouija board and the shadows, she didn't laugh or call me crazy. Instead, she listened, her face growing pale with each detail I shared. "We need to cleanse your apartment," she said, her voice steady but tinged with fear. "There's something attached to you, and we have to get rid of it." Emily came over that night armed with sage, candles, and a book on spiritual cleansing. We went through every room, burning sage and chanting prayers. I felt a bit foolish, but also desperate. As the smoke filled the rooms, I could feel the shadows recoiling, retreating to the darkest corners. For a moment I thought it was working. The apartment felt lighter, less oppressive. Emily left, reassuring me that the worst was over. I finally managed to sleep, the first time in days, without feeling the weight of unseen eyes on me. But my relief was short-lived. The next day, the shadows were back, angrier than ever. They moved faster, darting around my peripheral vision. I could hear the whispers more clearly now, like they were right next to me. They spoke of death, of suffering, of things too horrible to repeat. I started seeing things that weren't there. Faces in the mirrors, twisted and malevolent. Dark figures standing at the foot of my bed, disappearing the moment I turned on the lights. I couldn't trust my own senses. I was spiraling, losing my grip on reality. One night, I woke up to the sound of heavy breathing. At first, I thought it was my own, but then I realized it was coming from the corner of the room. I turned on the lamp, and for a split second, I saw it, a tall, shadowy figure with glowing red eyes, standing there watching me. I screamed and threw the lamp at it, but it vanished before the lamp shattered against the wall. That's when I decided to seek professional help. I found a local paranormal investigator, a guy named Marcus, who agreed to come over and take a look. Marcus was serious and professional, not the kind of guy who'd bullshit you. He brought equipment, cameras, EMF detectors, and some weird gadget that measured spiritual energy. Marcus set up his equipment and asked me a series of questions about the Ouija board session and the events that followed. He listened intently, nodding occasionally, but mostly staying silent. After setting up, he walked through the apartment, his EMF detector beeping sporadically. "It's strong," he said, his face grim. "Whatever you contacted is still here, and it's feeding off your fear." He suggested another cleansing, this time more intense, involving rituals and protections. I agreed, willing to try anything at this point. Marcus began the ritual, chanting in a language I didn't understand, drawing symbols on the walls with chalk. As the ritual progressed, the air grew thick and the shadows seemed to writhe in anger. Suddenly, the candles blew out, plunging us into darkness. I heard a deep, guttural growl, followed by a crash. The room filled with a freezing cold, and I could feel the shadows pressing in, suffocating me. Marcus shouted something, but his voice was drowned out by a cacophony of whispers and growls. In the chaos, I felt something grab my arm, its grip icy and painful. I screamed and tried to pull away, but it held tight, dragging me toward the darkened corner of the room. I could see the outline of the shadowy figure, its red eyes burning with hatred. Just as I thought I was done for, the grip loosened, and I fell to the floor, gasping for breath. Marcus managed to relight the candles, and the oppressive presence slowly receded. I was shaken, bruised, and terrified, but alive. Marcus looked at me, his face pale and sweat-soaked. "This isn't over," he said. "Whatever it is, it's powerful, and it's not going to let you go easily." I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those red eyes staring back at me. The shadows were still there, lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike again. I was living in a nightmare, and there was no waking up. I don't know how to fight this thing. I don't even know what it is. All I know is that it's getting stronger, and it wants me. I can't keep living like this, but I don't see a way out. The shadows are everywhere, and they're closing in. After the failed ritual, Marcus suggested I take a break and stay somewhere else for a while. Maybe the distance would help weaken whatever had latched onto me. I packed a bag and moved in with my parents. They were worried, of course, seeing their grown son suddenly asking to stay without much of an explanation. I told them it was work stress, a lame excuse, but they didn't push. For the first couple of nights, things were calm. I started to believe that maybe Marcus was right, that maybe I could escape the shadows by simply leaving them behind. But on the third night, it all came crashing down. I woke up in the middle of the night to that same cold, clammy feeling on my ankle. My heart stopped. I lay there, too terrified to move, hoping it was just my imagination. But then the whispers started again, louder and clearer than ever. They were angry, demanding, threatening. I bolted upright, yanking my leg away from the invisible grip and turning on the bedside lamp. Nothing. But the room felt different, darker, despite the light. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just sat there, staring at the corners of the room, waiting for something to emerge. The shadows were back, and they had followed me. It didn't matter where I went. They would find me. I was their prey, and they weren't going to let me go. Desperate, I decided to go back to Ryan's house. Maybe returning to where it all started would give me some answers. I needed to know what we had unleashed. I needed to understand why it had chosen me. Ryan was reluctant to let me in, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. But I begged, and he eventually caved. We sat in his living room, the same place where we had stupidly messed with the Ouija board. It felt colder, more sinister than before. I told Ryan everything that had happened since that night, every disturbing detail. He listened, his face growing paler with each word. "I've seen things too," he finally admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Shadows, whispers, things moving around on their own. I thought I was losing my mind. We decided to confront whatever it was together. Maybe strength in numbers would help. We retrieved the Ouija board from its hiding place and set it up exactly as before. This time, though, we were scared. The candles flickered as we sat down, the air heavy with anticipation. "Who are you?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling. The planchette moved immediately, more forcefully than before. "SHADE. We exchanged a glance, knowing this was the same entity from before. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The planchette slid across the board with a speed that made my heart race. "Yo, you!" My blood ran cold. The air grew frigid, and the shadows around us seemed to pulsate with dark energy. I felt a presence behind me, a cold breath on my neck. I turned slowly, expecting to see nothing, but there it was, the shadowy figure with glowing red eyes, standing right behind me. I screamed, falling backward and scrambling away. Ryan stood frozen, his eyes wide with terror. The figure didn't move, just stood there, watching us with those burning eyes. The planchette moved again on its own. LEAVE. We didn't need to be told twice. We ran out of the house, not stopping until we were in the safety of Ryan's car. We sat there, panting, trying to process what had just happened. "We need help," Ryan said, his voice shaking. "Real help." I agreed. We needed someone who knew what they were dealing with. Someone who could actually get rid of this thing. That's when Ryan mentioned his Aunt Clara. She was a medium, or so she claimed, and had dealt with spirits before. It was a long shot, but we were out of options. We called Clara the next morning. She agreed to help, but warned us that it wouldn't be easy. Whatever you've contacted, it's powerful. It's not going to let go without a fight. Clara arrived that evening, bringing with her an array of strange tools and herbs. She walked through my parents' house, her face serious and focused. "This place is tainted," she said, her voice low. "It's here, and it's strong." She set up her tools, lighting incense and arranging crystals around the room. She began chanting in a language I didn't recognize, her voice growing louder and more intense. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to swirl around us, angry and agitated. Suddenly, Clara stopped. "It's not just a spirit," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "It's a demon." My heart sank. A demon? This was beyond anything I had imagined. Clara continued her ritual, her chants becoming more forceful. The shadows roared around us, and I felt a pressure building in my chest, like something was squeezing the life out of me. Then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. The shadows recoiled, and the room seemed to lighten. Clara looked exhausted, but relieved. "It's weakened, but it's not gone. You need to be vigilant. Keep these crystals with you at all times, and don't engage with it. Ever." I nodded, too shaken to speak. Clara left, and I felt a small glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could beat this thing. But deep down, I knew the fight was far from over. The shadows were still there, lurking, waiting for their chance to strike again, and I knew they wouldn't stop until they had me. Even with Clara's warning, a part of me wanted to believe that the worst was behind me. I carried the crystals everywhere, clinging to them like a lifeline. For a few days, it seemed like things were getting better. The whispers were quieter, the shadows less intrusive. I started to sleep again, though always with one eye open, half expecting the darkness to come alive. But it didn't last. One night, I was jolted awake by a piercing scream. At first, I thought it was in my dream, but then I heard it again, louder and more desperate. It was my mum. I jumped out of bed and ran to their room, heart pounding. My dad was already there, trying to comfort her. She was sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror, pointing at the corner of the room. "It was there!" she gasped, tears streaming down her face. A shadow. It was watching me. My blood ran cold. The shadows were no longer just after me. They were starting to torment my family. I knew I had to do something, and fast. I called Clara, begging her to come back. She agreed, but her voice was tense. "It's getting stronger. We need to act now." Clara arrived the next day, bringing more tools and a look of grim determination. She set up a protective circle in my parents' bedroom, surrounding it with candles and crystals. She instructed us to sit inside the circle and began chanting once again. The air grew thick with tension, the shadows swirling just outside the circle, like predators waiting to pounce. As Clara chanted, I felt a pressure building in my head, a deep, throbbing pain. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling my mind with their venomous words. I could see the shadows closing in, their red eyes glowing with malevolent hunger. Clara's voice grew louder, more urgent. She sprinkled salt around the circle, the grains sparkling in the candlelight. "We need to banish it," she said, her voice strained. "All of you, focus. Think of light, of protection." I tried to focus, to think of anything that could help. I pictured bright, blinding light pushing back the darkness, but the shadows seemed to sense my fear, growing more aggressive, their whispers turning into roars. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and I screamed, trying to shake it off. Clara's chanting reached a fever pitch. The candles flickered wildly, and the room grew colder. I could see the shadowy figure, its red eyes burning with fury, standing just outside the circle. It reached out, its dark form twisting and writhing, trying to break through the barrier. Suddenly, there was a blinding flash of light, and the shadows recoiled, hissing and screeching. The pressure in my head exploded into searing pain, and I blacked out. When I came to, I was lying on the floor. the room filled with the scent of burnt incense. Clara was slumped against the wall, looking exhausted but relieved. "It's gone," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "For now." I helped her up, my body aching and my mind reeling. "What do you mean, for now?" Clara shook her head. "It's weakened, but it's not defeated. It will come back, and next time it will be even stronger. You need to prepare yourself. This fight isn't over." Her words filled me with dread. I thanked her and she left, but her warning lingered. I knew she was right. The shadows might be gone for now, but they would return. And next time, I might not be so lucky. In the days that followed, I tried to prepare. I read everything I could about demons and spiritual warfare, trying to find some way to protect myself and my family. I kept the crystals close, surrounded my bed with salt, and even hung garlic and holy symbols around the house. I didn't know what would work, but I had to try something. The nights were the hardest. Every creak, every whisper of wind made my heart race. I slept with the lights on, too scared to let the darkness in. My parents were on edge too, jumping at shadows, their nerves frayed by the constant fear. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my door. I froze, listening. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, moving closer. I reached for the baseball bat I kept by my bed, my heart pounding in my chest. The door creaked open, and I saw a shadowy figure standing there, its red eyes glowing in the dark. It didn't move, just stood there, watching me. I could feel its hatred, its desire to consume me. I gripped the bat tighter, ready to swing, but it was useless. The shadowy figure seemed to grow, filling the room with its darkness. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent, filling my mind with their cruel, mocking words. "You can't escape," they said. "You belong to us." I swung the bat, but it passed through the figure, hitting the wall with a dull thud. The shadow laughed, a deep, guttural sound that sent chills down my spine. It moved closer, and I could feel its icy breath on my face. Desperate, I grabbed one of the crystals and held it up. The shadow recoiled, hissing in anger. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, but I held my ground, pushing the crystal towards the shadow. It shrieked, a sound that made my ears bleed, and then it vanished, leaving me shaking and terrified. I knew then that this was a battle I couldn't fight alone. I needed help, real help, from someone who truly understood the darkness I was facing. The shadows were still there, lurking, waiting for their chance to strike again, and I knew that next time they wouldn't stop until they had me. After the last encounter, I knew I couldn't delay any longer. The shadows were relentless, and they were only getting stronger. I reached out to every contact Clara had given me, seeking anyone with more experience, more knowledge. That's when I found Father O'Malley. Father O'Malley was an old, weathered priest who had dealt with more than his fair share of the supernatural. He agreed to meet me at his church, a small, ancient building that seemed to radiate a sense of calm and protection. As I walked into his office, he looked up, his piercing blue eyes filled with understanding and concern. "I've heard about your troubles," he said, his voice deep and soothing. "You've stirred something dark, something that won't let go easily. But I believe we can banish it if you're willing to fight." I nodded, my determination outweighing my fear. "I'll do whatever it takes." Father O'Malley explained that we would need to perform a powerful exorcism, not just on me, but on my home. He warned me that it would be dangerous, that the entity would fight back with everything it had. But it was the only way to truly rid myself of the shadows. The exorcism was set for the next evening. Father O'Malley arrived with an array of tools: holy water, crucifixes, incense, and ancient texts filled with prayers and rituals. He walked through my house, blessing each room and setting up protection wards. My parents were too scared to stay, so they went to a friend's house, leaving us alone to face the darkness. As night fell, the atmosphere in the house grew heavy and oppressive. The shadows seemed to gather, sensing the coming confrontation. Father O'Malley began his prayers, his voice strong and unwavering. The air grew colder, and the candles flickered wildly. The shadows started to move, swirling around us, their whispers turning into growls. I could feel the hatred radiating from them, a palpable force that made my skin crawl. Father O'Malley continued his prayers, splashing holy water and brandishing the crucifix. Suddenly, the shadows lashed out, a black tendril wrapping around Father O'Malley's arm. He cried out, but didn't stop praying. I grabbed a bottle of holy water and threw it at the tendril. It hissed and recoiled, releasing its grip. The shadows shrieked in rage, their red eyes glowing with fury. "Stay strong," Father O'Malley shouted. "We're weakening it." I nodded, holding the crucifix in front of me like a shield. The shadows swirled faster, their forms becoming more defined, more menacing. I could see the shadowy figure with the red eyes, standing at the center of the chaos. It reached out towards me, its voice a low, guttural growl. "You belong to us," it hissed. "No," I shouted back, my voice shaking but determined. "You can't have me." Father O'Malley continued his prayers, louder and more forceful. The shadows seemed to waver, their forms flickering like a dying flame. I stepped forward, holding the crucifix high. "Leave this place," I shouted. "In the name of God, leave." The shadowy figure screamed, a sound that echoed through the house, rattling the windows. It lunged at me, its icy grip wrapping around my throat. I gasped for breath, feeling the darkness closing in. But then, Father O'Malley placed his hand on my shoulder, his voice ringing out with authority. "By the power of Christ, I command you to leave." There was a blinding flash of light, and the shadows screamed in agony. I felt the grip loosen, and the darkness began to recede. The shadowy figure with the red eyes writhed, its form dissolving into nothingness. The air grew warmer, the oppressive weight lifting from the house. It was over. Father O'Malley collapsed to the floor, exhausted but triumphant. I helped him up, tears of relief streaming down my face. The house felt different, lighter, like a dark cloud had been lifted. The shadows were gone. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice trembling with gratitude. Father O'Malley nodded, his eyes kind but weary. "It's over, but you must remain vigilant. Evil like that doesn't give up easily. Stay strong in your faith, and it will not return." I promised to heed his advice, knowing that I had been given a second chance. My parents returned, overjoyed to see the change in me and the house. We cleaned up, removing the protective wards, but keeping the holy symbols and crystals as a precaution. Life slowly returned to normal. The nightmares faded, and the shadows no longer haunted my every step. I could finally sleep through the night without fear, knowing that the darkness had been banished. But I'll never forget what happened. I'll never forget the feeling of those cold, clammy hands, the whispers in the dark, the red eyes watching me. I learned the hard way that some things should never be messed with, that the supernatural is not something to take lightly. I played with a Ouija board, and it almost cost me my soul. But I fought back, with the help of those who believed in me, and I survived. The shadows are gone, but their memory remains. A constant reminder to respect the unknown and never invite darkness into your life. If you ever find yourself tempted to play with a Ouija board, to mess with forces beyond your understanding, remember my story. Remember the shadows, the fear, the battle, and think twice before you open a door that you might never be able to close.